Hello and welcome to another Jenkins X Community Office Hours. We're going to have some interesting discussions, I think, today. Hopefully, we're going to have a bit of a demo as well. But I think one of the main focuses of today was really to try and address some of the feedback we've been having, really dive into some of the things that we're trying to do to help improve some of the great feedback we've had recently as well. But just to start off with everything, on the agenda, actually, there's a link. If anybody's around, there is a Jenkins X Contributor Summit that's actually going to be happening as part of Jenkins World, DevOps World, next month. So Monday, August 12th, that's over in San Francisco. There's a bunch of us going to be there, and if anybody's around, then come say hello. It's the links there. I think it's a free event on that Monday. But don't quote me on that one. But okay, so. Just to kick things off, I guess we wanted to really just, I guess, recognise some of the changes that have been happening recently. And we know that we've been, Jenkins X is now a year and a half old. We went through massive speed, the first 12 to 18 months. And now what we're looking to do is to grow up and be more mature. We're taking lots of steps to actually do that. But we also recognise during that time, to be able to go fast, that we've had to, there are some, I guess, some shortcuts that we've made, but we are recognising and looking to address and improve those areas. We also know that there's been, when we do releases, there's been some challenges around, is something actually stable? How's it gone through enough checks and testing as well? And how do these different versions tie up? Because we do so many releases. And then also, one of the other things we've kind of brought to our attention, we're aware of, and we know we're not doing a good enough job around, is how we're actually going about a lot of our activities. Certainly from Cloudbee's point of view, that we're not doing really enough to be visible and approachable, probably in some of the Slack channels and maybe on issues as well. So it's quite some. We've had, it's really good. I'm glad Terry's on the line as well. So maybe if at any point there's other feedback we can actually anybody else out there as well, we really would appreciate it, because unless we can get this feedback, then we can't actually improve. I was going to ask Pete, maybe if you could, bearing in mind some of those challenges and some of the feedback and the challenges that we had, I was wondering if you're able to talk a bit about some of the things we're actually doing and how we're looking to try and improve that and tackle that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things that, like James says, that we are aware of that have gone wrong over the last few weeks, and started to try and make some structural changes, I think would be a good way to describe them, to what we're doing in order to try and prevent them happening again. I'm pretty sure that these aren't the only things that have gone wrong, and we aren't addressing all of the problems. So, that's where the feedback part comes in. And I know that one of the things we're hoping to do is sort of take another look at how we do the triage process of issues. Cara, who works on the community team at Cloudbee, she's at a conference this week, but she's back next week. So I don't know if do we have office hours next week, James? We have them every week now, right? Every other week. So the next time we do office hours, we're going to get Cara and we're going to work through how we do a new triage process with her. But for now, I'm going to talk through some of the kind of the technical stuff that we've been working on. So I think the big problem that we identified a few weeks ago was that whilst many of the components that we release are validated by something called the versions repository, which basically assembles all of the bits together and runs a whole suite of end-to-end tests on all of those components together. Whilst most of the things that we do are validated and aren't sort of let out into the wild through things like JX Upgrade Platform or JX Install, until all of those tests passed, there was one significant component which was getting released too early, and that was the JX binary itself. And we were seeing that we were introducing issues into the JX binary that were getting caught by the versions repo that were unfortunately making their way into the hands of users, because the binary itself that you run locally was getting upgraded before all those checks passed. And I think this is actually a fairly common problem in microservice architectures, right? You have lots of repos and they have lots of dependencies on each other, and you've somehow got to, at some point, kind of bring them all back together. And we also identified a second problem, which is that we could end up with multiple different versions of the JX binary in different situations. So one would obviously be on your local CLI, but we could end up with perhaps one version being used in some of the builders and another version being used in some of the controllers, which I don't think is a problem day to day, but when things go wrong, it makes reasoning about why things have gone wrong very, very, very difficult, because you've got different versions of the code running in different places. So I'll just share my screen and I'll put some links in the user channel, try and put some links in the user channel as I go so people can follow along. What we're doing is still work in progress, but I think we've got far enough that I can really kind of describe a lot of what we're doing in some detail and show you some examples of it. We're trying to enable all of this on the Jenkins X repos at the moment. It's a long process because a lot of this is to do with releases, and as everyone knows, when you're working on how you do your release, you have to wait for everything to merge and everything to run first. So it's taking us a long time to get this all in the right place, but it's coming together at the moment. Okay, so the first thing is this document, which is basically what I've just talked through. So I'll put a link to this in the user channel on Slack. I think everyone can get access to it. I did check that just before we came on. And this is just basically like a problem statement that identifies what I've just talked about, right? So this problem where we can end up with multiple versions, different versions, which is like, for me, the way that I understood this was by analogy with the diamond inheritance problem that you have in like C++, right? You can have multiple different versions of the same thing coming through paths, and it can get very confusing. And also the gating problem. So then I can go to this very excellent diagram that I think Kai and Gareth worked on that shows the way that this is the way we currently do releases. So this is a further problem I didn't even identify in the problem statement properly, which is, as you can see, this diagram has a lot of arrows that cross each other, which from a sanity perspective is probably not ideal. So this is great. This identifies where we are today. What they also did was draw out this other diagram, which, apart from being prettier because it's in lots of nice colors, also, as you can see, has fewer crossing lines, which I think basically identifies that this is a lot better. Let me put this one link in the chat. I am not sure if people can see this, but this document, there's an export of this up on the website anyway, so I can put that in the chat as well, even if people can't get into the original. That's down at the bottom of this page, the new improved release stream. So what that should hopefully do is allow us to produce a more, I call it a consistent platform, right? One which we're using the same version, and it's easier to reason about what's going on. So that's good because it does allow us to start to introduce a little bit more sanity. But at the same time, what we also wanted to do was make sure we didn't get into this situation again, where there are two things, right? So one, we didn't get into this kind of like different versions of stuff all over the place again. And secondly, we wanted to make sure that we didn't release the JX binary until the versions repo, which is here, has passed all of its tests. So as I'm sure many of you know, the way we do the updates of all these components is via a utility called UpdateBot. This is a relatively old component nowadays that I think James and James wrote a few years ago. And one of our problems, honestly, was maintainability. It was an old code base that we weren't very clear on. So, if you're thinking about how you would track dependencies through this kind of system, the obvious way to do it is as the bot commits updates to dependencies into the system, you would use those commit messages in order to build out some kind of dependency matrix and dependency tree. So the first step to doing that was to rewrite, or to start to rewrite portions of UpdateBot into JX. This just gives us a more modern code base that we can iterate more quickly on. And this definitely proved to be true. I managed to do the rewrite in about I don't know, 10 or 15 hours or something like that. So that would have taken me that long to understand the UpdateBot code base and make some progress with it, I think. So this was definitely a good move. So you'll see now that we start to have these JX step create pull request commands appearing. These are a bit like the old UpdateBot commands. In fact, they exactly mirror the old UpdateBot commands. So what they do is when you do a release, so when we do a release of the JX binary, what we do is we run this JX step create pull request command. It then creates a pull request on another repo requesting that update, just like UpdateBot used to do. But the big change that I did in here was I switched from using a the message that update bot was using, which was not following the conventional commit format and was missing a load of information, to using a much more standard message in the pull request. So I've got this example here, and you can see that what we do in the commit is we use this standardized message format, and we make sure that we specify what we're updating, so the Git project that we are updating and what we're updating from and to. We're then able to, let me find what my example's on, this one maybe. Yeah, we're then able to, as you can see, to use this to start to generate this dependency update matrix. I've obviously got a bit of a bug here because I've got the same dependency being updated twice. That's not supposed to be happening. But the idea is you start to be able to build out this dependency update matrix, and then from that you can start to build a resultant dependency matrix in your project. So here, this is just some sample projects I've got that I was using to test it out. But let me show you. So we've got the dependency matrix here. We've got, let's look at the markdown one first, it's easier to read. So this is being generated by those update bot pull requests on the repo. And you can see, we can start to see the dependency versions that we have in this case in the tip of master in this project. And we can also see that, for example, here, we've got two different dependencies. One for project 2, which is a direct dependency of this project, but that project 2 is also pulling project 1 in as a transitive dependency, and we're able to track that version number through the system. So if we go back to this diagram down here, you can see why that's important, because what we need to do is be able to track the version number of JX all the way through to the Jenkins X versions repo, so that we know what version of Jenkins X is being used in Jenkins X versions. We also, just a moment, sorry, I'm going to deal with the puppy. So we also, he's chewing the wrong thing. We also can use this, as you can start to see from what I'm showing here, we can also see these different sources or different paths that the dependency is coming in on. And we can also use that to track, are we getting what I'm calling mismatch versions coming in? So I've got, I haven't got a good demo of that in a repo, but I think I had a, yeah, I had a test case here to show that. So this is the YAML representation of that markdown file. And you can see here we've got a couple of different dependencies. One that's, I think this top one is not okay, and the bottom one is okay. And you can see that on this one, we've got this dependency on, I think, on the Roadrunner dependency, and we've got these two different paths on which it's coming in. And we've got one path on which it's coming in on version 2 and one that's coming in on version 1. And so as we start to build out this kind of matrix of data, we can actually start to analyze and check, do we have the right dependencies coming in and are we getting mismatched versions? We've got a step that I've written that's merged, which allows us to actually just iterate over that matrix and fail the build, fail the pull request if we're getting mismatched versions coming in, so we can actually start to validate that. So that kind of like starts to allow us to understand what versions are in use, and also have the ability to not release the dependency until we are ready to. And I'm going to hand over to Kai now, because he's going to do a little bit of a demo about how we are going to not release the JX binary until all the versions tests have passed. So Kai, if you're ready, I'll stop sharing and hand over.
Yep. Yeah, sure. I've just got a quick question, Pete, while you're doing that. So just to make sure that, I guess, the people on the right line, when they say we've got multiple different versions coming in, the protection we've got against that.
Yep.
I think we're just being clear about, we're just making sure that more than one repository that then runs the update bot isn't sending a different version of the component that it wishes to update. So that when we get to that build, we can go, hey, what's going on here? I've got this version and this version.
Exactly.
Fail.
Because quite often, it's quite often fine for one repository to send one update because its build finishes faster than another repository, right? So it's fine for it to send it, but it's got to, basically you've got to do a kind of fork join thing, and you've got to wait at your join point until all of the updates have come in to that version. That's probably what's absolutely critical here. So what this allows us to do is block on the PR until, and fail the build until that PR is updated to have all of the forked and joined dependencies coming in.
Yeah, cool, brilliant. Okay, so what a little part of that I've been working on is also to when we do push out JX, that we don't just push out a full release of, say, a version of JX in itself. So I've got myself a quick test repo that I created here, and I've been tagging it and releasing it using Go Releaser, which is actually what we use now in JX. And part of the Go Releaser config actually states that we wish to have a pre-release when we do actually create releases in GitHub. So the current version I got at the moment is 0.017, as you can see on the left. Hopefully my screen isn't too small. And I will go ahead, I've already done the command ready to just whip out a tag, push it up, and then run Go Releaser and actually create a release 0.0.18. And you can see it's building the binaries. It's just, there's nothing to this Go program at all. It's just something very, very simple. I think it's probably just printing something to the screen. Nice thing about Go Releaser is it's got quite a lot of functionality to it. You can actually get it to update any brew artifacts. I think it's got Scoop as well, and it'll also release all your binaries, Windows binaries, and archive them up and everything as well. So it's pretty quite useful. So once that's pushed up and released, we should now see release 18 in a pre-release state. And this is where we expect PRs to be raised across the version stream of this new release artifact of JX. Even though it's in a pre-release state, we can still use those binaries. We can still test them. We can still push them through the version stream. And once they go through to the actual Jenkins X versions, pass their PR build, have the various tests running against using that particular version of JX. And once they're merged into master, we then expect a recent step command that I've been working on to go ahead and then update that particular version to a release step. So if I go and quickly run that step command, that should then go off and update this release 0.0.18 to a release state. So that will then hopefully trigger the downstream build, the downstream releases then of any artifacts that need to use that newer version in that release state. So things like brew, docs, and any other things that trigger downwards from JX. And that's pretty much it, really. Any questions on that at all? No? Sounds good.
So obviously, these are fundamental problems for any sort of DevOps-based organization. And they're all problems that customers are going to want to solve as well. So are we wrapping up this functionality and including it into the platform itself so that it becomes a capability that gets delivered as a feature?
I'll say quickly, it will need to be to allow us to be able to test this feature so that we can actually put our own binary through this feature. We'll need to mock it and test it and actually reuse that. So any quick start or any apps that you then import into Jenkins X should essentially be able to leverage that same release functionality that JX itself is actually leveraging.
So, I mean, yes, on all counts. So for the bit that I showed, there are two key JX steps. So the JX step create PR, which is what generates the correct update messages and the dependency matrix. And then the JX step changelog, which is what generates the release notes and attaches the dependency matrix onto the release. Both of those are built into JX. JX step changelog is an old thing that was written a long time ago, and the create PR ones are the ones that I've written. I've also added that verification step to allow you to verify your dependency matrix. So yep, again, that's part of the platform. And then what Kai has been working on, I mean, how you choose to do your exactly how you choose to build up your matrix, I suppose, is kind of up to you to a little bit. But Kai has built a step. I was going to show it. It's still still being PR'd at the moment, but this update release step that allows you to promote releases from pre-release to release on the Git provider. So so far what we've got is all the pieces are all part of the platform. I don't think we've worked out a way to put this into a quick start or an import command or anything like that yet, as it's, as this tends to be about how multiple projects work together rather than how one project works. And most of our quick start stuff is I know yours, Terry, is maybe a good place to take a look, because I know you've got multiple projects in some of your stuff that you're working on, so maybe that could be something to look at. But I don't think I thought too much about how to actually put it in the quick starts, but yeah, the building blocks are all in the platform. That was something I really thought was important with this. This is a problem you hit time and time again, and it's important that we make this generally available, not specific for our problem, for our situation. So. And then there's a question from Jesse on Slack, which is Dependabot and release drafter can do all of this stuff from the outside. And then a second one, which is maybe all of this would be easier with a mono repo. So I think with the second question first, the mono repo one, yes. I mean, if you have a mono repo, many of these challenges go away because you have everything singly versioned, and you just do a big bang release of everything. I don't think we need to go into the pros and cons of mono repos right now, because I think that's a whole other debate. And then the Dependabot release draft thing, yeah, it's a very similar solution. So release drafter is the JX step changelog equivalent, and Dependabot does very similar things to UpdateBot. My understanding of Dependabot is it's a slightly different model, because Dependabot is more of a pull-based model where it sits in a loop basically and watches for dependency updates and then opens pull requests. Whereas what we do with UpdateBot, we call a push model, which is where as part of the build we actually push those updates proactively into the downstream dependency. Old UpdateBot, the original one, used to do both push and pull. And quite honestly, I'm hoping to drop the pull functionality from the new UpdateBot, because I think we can just use Dependabot to do that. I don't see why not. And we've actually copied their copy maybe sounds a bit like plagiarize. We've reused their commit message format and all of that. So hopefully all of this stuff is completely interoperable is the idea.
And the idea about Dependabot was we were looking to use that for third-party dependencies as well, wasn't it?
Which is where a pull model really makes a lot of sense. But I think when you're inside your own code base, I quite like being able to push stuff. Yeah. Did we have any? I can see some chat messages. Anyone else who's looking at the chat messages? Do we have anything there that's questions we should answer, or?
This is we've been asked. Where is the code for this?
So the code is all in Jenkins X. Honestly, I would prefer to get this working for our own code base to make sure our code actually works. Like so far, this has worked in test scenarios, but we have a good complicated code base. So I'm aiming to get it working there. I think we're going to try. Kai and I are going to try and do that this week, and then I'm going to write some docs for this hopefully next week in the blog and things, because I think this is really interesting.
So that's brilliant. Thanks for taking us through that. I think.
Am I out of time, James, or I've got a couple more things I can go through if it would be useful?
Well, yeah, go for it.
So these hopefully are shorter ones. The first one was the BDD tests. So let me switch to those. So the BDD tests, or as I'm trying to get everyone to call them, the end-to-end tests, because I think it's a more descriptive name for what they actually are the way that we validate kind of how the whole platform works together. And to be honest, these have got themselves into a bit of a mess over the last 9 months, let's say. So I did a big refactor, and I've got another one pending a couple of weeks ago to try and make them a little bit more understandable. So I've got a video. I'll put the link to the video with narration in the notes for this, and people can look at it in their own time. But this is really just a request. If they are now hopefully in a state where they're a bit easier to use. So I think one of the things that we would like to do is start to capture some of the breaking changes and breaking scenarios that we're inadvertently generating in the BDD test to try and prevent regressions, and work with community members to try and actually get those scenarios really captured down. So I just want to give a very quick idea of what a BDD test or an end-to-end test looks like, if that's possible. So I'll just go into this create Spring one, as it's a really good one to take a look at. So as you can see, basically, I know this looks like a bit of a mess of code, but see if I can zoom in at all. No, apparently not. Okay, there we are. Excellent. So what this is doing, as you can see, is it's going to run the JX create Spring command, and possibly use a different Git provider for it. It's then going to execute that and wait for that command to finish. It's then going to use a couple of these utility methods we have, like the application should be built and promoted via CI/CD. What that method does is obviously self-explanatory with that long method name. But what this command is actually doing is it's going to run commands. It's going to, yeah, the application should be built and promoted. So that there should be a job that completes successfully. It's another method, but it's going to run command like JX get activities where's it? JX get build logs, and use those commands and parse the output of those commands in order to validate that those commands have completed successfully. So this is very much like, basically you sitting there on the keyboard and typing away, and what you would do in order to validate it. So what I'm hoping is that with these changes to the end-to-end tests, that what we can do is make them easier to write and get more of those sort of breaking scenarios captured so that we can run them. Right now, they are a little bit complicated to run. So James Strachan and myself have a kind of cunning plan to kind of try and make them run a bit more easily and package them up a bit more carefully. But one of the first things that we're going to do is, at the moment they need all this kind of complicated bootstrap through Ginkgo. So the next refactor I'm doing is just to make them run from Go test. So you can just do Go test and they'll run against your existing cluster. So I'd love some feedback on the end-to-end tests, and I'd also love some help with trying to start capturing some of these scenarios that aren't working for people in there, so that we stop them breaking again in the future.
Presumably, we can try and make it easy for people to contribute their own scenarios as well.
Yeah,
maybe
exactly. Yeah. So I think that's what we've got to figure out. I think the first thing was, to be honest, we were even struggling contributing scenarios because we didn't understand what the hell was going on in them. Hopefully with this refactor, I've tried to add a lot more comments, a lot more explanation, a package structure, and a standard, and try to make sure they all do things in the same way. So we've got some common patterns to copy. But then it's a case of, how do we make them even easier to write and to run so that we're capturing people's scenarios? And I think a big part of that is I started writing parsers for the commands that you run, that you get output from. But I think we need to build up that library of parsers. So it's really easy just to say, I want to run JX get applications, and I want, in the staging environment, and I want to see what it returns and make sure that this, this application is in the list or whatever. That would be the key thing. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure. To be honest, I don't have a strong idea of how we're going to do this, but I think it's something that's we should really focus on. So I think that's what I've got to talk about, James. I can talk about the other things I might talk about next week, because I realise we're now half an hour in. So.
I think it's all worthwhile, though. I mean, this is what we're really trying to share is that we recognise a lot of the challenges that we've had and recognise how fast we grew, but we are putting a lot of effort into ensuring that we mature as an open source project and we make it easier for people to also contribute as well and be more involved in. Certainly, we've now started. We've also recognised that it's very easy on Slack, for example, in any company, to be on your own internal Slack, and you make it easy because it's easy communication. And I think for a number of us actually fell into that trap slightly. We made a conscious effort to actually switch all of our discussions over onto the Jenkins X Dev channel. Terry is a great example of actually just getting involved in those and sharing the feedback and understanding, and as a result PRs are actually coming up that actually made sense and people can actually see that actually happening. We're going to be doing more around triaging of issues, helping and giving advice of how people can maybe contribute and areas to investigate, and so we just really wanted to kind of take a moment and say thanks to everybody for everything, all the involvement people have been with, and obviously bearing with us as we've grown quite fast, but also recognising that we are going to be paying you back by making things more reliable or stable and predictable as well. So please keep the feedback coming. Please, when you see a conversation, just jump in there, something that you can relate to or you have an opinion on. Please don't hold back. We want this community to grow, to be a nice, encouraging community to all of us as well. So, okay, I mean, how about, is there any questions on anything of that? Just as Pete's gone out of the room, but any questions on any of that, anything that we're doing or anything we can do better, do we think?
Do you want to say a little bit more about the version streams side of things and how we're going to manage new features versus maintaining older releases?
Yeah, so no, that's a good one. So right now we don't have one of the things we want to do, and we haven't got a good enough answer for this yet, is how to mark features, say, as more experimental. So we want to be, we don't want to be forking or having branches, long-running branches. We want to be taking the advice from the Accelerate book and committing to master, and master's always golden. But we do need a way to be able to say, for now, say, as an example, JX Boots, which is, we're going to be rapidly accelerating that because we know it solves a gazillion issues that are already open on our issue tracker. But we need to put something out there to get that feedback and get people to help and get involved in it as well. So I think we need to be better in the way of our messaging to say when a new feature is available, and where we need help as well, and what do people think about it. I don't know, did we investigate before? I don't think it's got any ideas, but did we investigate about CLI flags or something around? I know G Cloud has something around you can enable alpha features and G Cloud and everything. Does anybody know if there's anything available that we have to us now for that? Similar thing.
I don't think we have anything yet, do we?
Yeah.
We should add something that makes it easy to roll out an experimental feature. And what I've really worried for a while is by default, hide everything experimental. So if you do like JX Help, you don't see the experimental stuff, but have an experimental mode where you see all the experimental stuff. And then we can roll out new things, but clearly mark them experimental. They're hidden from most people, but if you really want, you could turn them on then. But like Cobra doesn't have anything like that, does it? So we're going to have to hack Cobra, I think.
Yeah, I know Warren's done a fair bit of investigation around this before as well. I don't know if Warren's on the call, probably not. But,
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there you are. Sorry.
Yeah. So I did a bit of a rollout before. If you remember, we were using that for potentially for distribution, but we could use that potentially, I guess, in this scenario for doing that. Because I did a bit of work about hiding feature flags and stuff, and it would be doable. Probably something we could look at.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get it onto the backlog and get more focus and more eyes on it, because we know that's one of the challenges, because we don't want to slow down, but we also don't want to impede and cause people to lose any time in their day-to-day jobs and cause developers to slow down. So yeah, we can take that on board and try and get that boosted up as priority and try and get that looked at. Would that help, Terry, on that one?
Yeah, again, I think this is a standard problem in this space. So we need to be looking for something that's actually part of the product and can be used downstream as well as for your own release process. Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions from anybody else on anything that's just been talked about? Because it's quite important. It's insanely important. We're talking about how we're maturing and how we're growing as a community. So if people do have any more ideas, then please feel free to share. Okay, or we can just go into a bit more of a demo and give people a little bit more time to think about some more questions or feedback. This demo will probably take about 5 to 10 minutes, and we'll do a bit of talking over it as well. So I don't know, James, if you wanted to do, you showed JX Boot before, right? Did you want to tee up some of the problems that we had around with TLS maybe and various things?
Yeah, I won't talk as much as I did last week. I'll just do a very short couple of minutes. So in general, we've had all these different code paths to try and deal with installing, configuring, or updating the platform. And we've found all these different loose ends and loose edges and strange certain sets of parameters and files and whatever that can lead to secrets disappearing, values from config maps going away, all kinds of weird stuff has happened. We added JX Upgrade Ingress to deal with changing ingresses and domains, but that didn't change the ingress controller itself or cert manager. That was all fairly hard coded. So we've had all these kind of issues with install and upgrade platform. It's really hard to do really, really well. So the thing I'm really excited about Boot, it's still not totally finished, and we can still polish it some more to be easy to consume. But the thing I love, I've been using Boot quite a lot lately, and the thing I really love about Boot is you run it, you change some config, just run it again. So you could use it to change anything, to do upgrades, to change the config, to move from Prow to Jenkins or back to Prow again, to do TLS or not, to change secrets, to change anything at all in the platform. I'm just experimenting right now with an alternative to Prow, which we'll maybe talk about in a few months when it's a bit more solid. But I'm just doing boot right now and just running boot again and again and again and just trying all sorts of different configs and flags, and it's just easy. We always struggled with a really easy way to tinker with Jenkins X, whether it's adding an app, changing an app, configuring an app, changing secrets, changing the bot token, changing the Git provider. We've always had all these magic commands all over the place to do all these little tweaks. With boot, we can change literally anything at all. So with boot, we can say, let's try a different ingress controller. Let's try change cert manager. Let's try a different version of any of the possible charts in the transitive dependency tree in Jenkins X. So it really empowers us, I think, to just iterate quickly and test all sorts of different things without having to write all these custom solutions for custom scenarios, which has been our strategy up to now. So that's my basic bit. Over to you, James. I'm excited for this demo.
Fingers crossed it works. So one of the things as well, you mentioned it briefly there about Expose Controller. Quite a lot of people may start contributing for knowing about Expose Controller. It was kind of a good idea at the time, but it was, this is this is a number of years old now. It's one of that and Update Bot that Pete was saying that's been replaced. And the only two things that we actually brought over from Fabricate from the old days. So we're actually not using Expose Controller anymore because we're not dynamically creating ingress rules. These are actually all stored in the Git repository, so you can change and tinker with things as well.
Just to be clear, we don't use Expose Controller for the development environment.
Yes.
But we still do in previews and production and stuff. But then we could get rid of that as well.
The hope is to get rid of that as well, and then have everything in Git. Yeah. So I'm going to share my screen with that in mind. What we have here is one of the other things around with Jenkins X is we did, because we were familiar with Go, we created these JX create cluster commands for different different cloud providers, so EKS, AKS, GKE, had contributions from Oracle and IBM's clouds, which is great. But now, what we've had a lot of feedback on people running this in their enterprise companies, they have already other ways to actually provision out clusters, or for example, Terraform is a very popular one. So what we want to do as well was have that better separation between creating a cluster and then booting up, installing everything as well. So just for this demo purposes, I've previously created a cluster called, using JX create cluster GKE skip installation. This is just a bare bones cluster. I could have done this through the GKE console or anything else. One of the hardest things around we've got some great single sign-on application in Jenkins X, which really helps with people single sign-on their applications. But to have a single sign-on, you need to have TLS. To have set up TLS, you need to have a domain and you need to have ownership, and it can be a little bit picky. So what we wanted to show here is some of the efforts we've been doing to try and make it easier to enable TLS right from the installation, from booting up. So after we created the cluster with skip installation, there's another manual task that I ran called create domain, JX create domain. Now this domain, rawlingsdemo.co.uk, I own that. That was bought over purchased over in GoDaddy. I'm actually going to see this. I've got a number of them. This one here, I think it is. What actually happens when I run this JX create domain, because we're running on GKE, and we haven't supported the others yet, but this is when running on GKE. Let's do my Google Cloud project. We can actually install something called external DNS. What external DNS will do is it runs in cluster, and it will actually take that domain and then register it inside Google Cloud's DNS service. By doing that, running that command, that would have done it. Because I've previously run it, it just prints out the name servers that I need to update GoDaddy with. So I've done create cluster skip installation. I've run JX create domain GKE and with my domain that I purchased. And then I went in and added in these name servers. So I'm sure different domain providers have the same functionality. Now, switching gears to JX Boots. We've heard quite a lot about this now already. This again is just being merged this morning. So again, we're looking for more feedback around this. We'll get some docs up there soon as well. This is a section around the cluster. If you don't provide any of this information, JX Boot will actually prompt you for this information. And here you can see we've got our domain. That was actually populated when boot ran the first time. But let's go and change that and use our newly created domain that is now being managed by Google's DNS. Let's have a look at here. Let's change that to, my domain is there, let's just change that. And we're going to use external DNS. Actually, we do set these by default as well, external DNS, if our provider is GKE. Not sure about dynamically changing these flags. Again, feedback welcome, if we should do that or not. And because we own this domain, it means we can actually enable TLS. Now we use the JetStack open source project called Cert Manager, which is amazing. The JetStack folks are awesome. If you haven't seen what they're doing out there, go and have a look at them. Really friendly folks as well. So we use Cert Manager, and when we enable this, we will install Cert Manager, and Cert Manager will then say, okay, we're going to create a wildcard. We're going to need a wildcard certificate for TLS across all of our ingress. So the Cert Manager will go off to Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt will do a DNS challenge back to Google and validate that we own that domain. And then it will issue a certificate, a real-size certificate, and automatically, Cert Manager will automatically update the secret inside the cluster. We'll have automated TLS. This is kind of a lot going on under the hoods. Hopefully it's kind of making a bit of sense, but let's just go and show this. Let's just say Rawlings J80, okay. Let's see if it's just been activated, gmail.com. So it's always good practice for when we're working with Cert Manager and Let's Encrypt to use the staging server of Let's Encrypt first, because you get rate limited heavily. So let's add our domain that we've created. External DNS, yes, we're adding an email and we're enabling it, and we're not going to use the production service. Now, I'm just clearing out this. I think, Terry, you were talking about this before, whether we still need it. But the important thing is JX Boot. You can see down here, whilst that's running, this was my default Jenkins X installation that was installed, that was running. You can see, here we go. The site is not secure. Next, oops. Next, it's running as HTTP. I'm using our, that was our magicnip.io domain. Running JX Boot is now running through the steps for our pipeline that we looked at from James's demo the last time. It's going to ensure that our ingress controller is set up and configured. It's going to ensure the Cert Manager is installed and configured as well. And then it will actually apply our installation. We can see here that we've got some templates, and you can see here that we've got, these are our ingress rules. So again, we're not using the expose controller. We're just saying, okay, if TLS is enabled, we're going to say, let's tell this ingress rule to use the certificate that Let's Encrypt is going to create for us. Sorry for the barking in the background. My kids have just come right home from school. Perfect timing. All right, okay, let's do this quickly. So what we should do now, we're applying everything. Now, again, this is really cool. You can see all the configuration here. We can see the secrets that are actually being used for the auth token, for example, all being masked. And we're just reapplying this configuration, but just enabling external DNS and TLS as well. Anytime now. Any questions whilst this is going on? And not necessarily about my dog, but anything at all whilst this is happening? Or does this make sense what I'm actually doing here? 3 months. Alrighty. Okay, keep watching here, keep watching here. Let's watch this at any point. Okay, now we're starting to apply and we've changed everything. Woohoo! So that's finished, okay? Don't worry about that. We're not too worried about that. We're going to go and have a look at that, but let's quickly, whilst we go and help check that domain, let's kick this one off. Let's say production true. Let's kick that one off again. In the meantime, let's go and have a look at Nexus and say, okay, well, it says, because we're using our staging environment from Let's Encrypt, they actually only issue us a self-signed certificate. Okay, so this allows us to do a bit more testing. So really, if anybody's going to use this, please do the staging server first. So production equals false. But that means what we can actually see is that was a wildcard certificate that was issued by Let's Encrypt. So this single certificate is used for all of our individuals. We also have something called Kubernetes Replicator, which is another sort of project. We're using this to actually replicate this wildcard certificate into our dynamically created preview environments. So we get automated TLS on all of our preview applications as well, and all staging and production environments too. So once that goes through, there's a few minutes left. That's because we've enabled production. Again, we've just run in JX boot again. Just James was mentioning before, we just keep on iterative rerunning, just tweaking things, and then running JX boot again. It's actually a joy to work with. And that should eventually go off. It'll go off to, it says, Let's Encrypt. Again, our DNS is all being managed by Google now here as well, because we enabled, changed the domain, and we enabled external DNS as well. So all of that's been automated as well. And that will go and use our real signed certificate. Whilst that's going, finishing off, any questions at all?
Yeah, how soon until this is released?
So this was, is the JX binary release peak? I guess all that other thing, it might be released already. I'll need to check. It certainly was merged this morning. So the version stream and the pre-release thing that Pete and Kai were actually talking about, it may not be available. It might be in pre-release at the moment. Oh, we'll check. You can certainly build the latest JX. Sorry, go on, Kai.
That should be available now. The pre-release stuff isn't quite ready to enable yet because we don't want to hold things back until we're ready to do anything. So yeah, you should, if it's merged, it should be released.
Oh, there we go.
That's brilliant. Great work.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Well, it's been with the help of Google services there, I would say. Little promotion there. But yeah, we can see our certificate. That's a real signed certificate that is being challenged by Let's Encrypt. So I know it sounds a bit silly, but I get very, very excited about seeing that nice padlock in the top left-hand side. And I think I'm not the only one in our industry as well. So we're really, really hoping that this is going to make it a lot easier for people to enable automated TLS using Jenkins X. Again, feedback really after this is, let's say this is experimental now, but we really want to accelerate this because of the way we are using it. It feels it is a much better experience and feels safer. Things are tracked and traceability and Git repositories as well. So it's a lot better to work with than the JX install. And we think this is going to close up a large number of open issues that we have currently on Jenkins X. All right. Okay, so we've got 7 minutes left. Can we just open it up? Because I think there's been a lot of talking from a few specific folks, but how about anything from anybody you would like to share at all? Feel free.
Quick update from me on the machine learning stuff. So we've now got CUDA support working for machine learning. So you can run services based on GPU trained models, but you can also now train models using GPU for acceleration. So we're actually dynamically mounting physical GPUs into builders on the fly, and then allowing you to run the build on the GPU, and then releasing that at the end of the build.
Sounds pretty awesome. So, has anybody else tried this out yet?
Where can we get some links for that? That's interesting.
So just JX create ML quick start.
So I think there's also, we had a, Terry presented this on one of the office hours previously. We'll get the link to that because it'll be on YouTube, and send that over to you as well. Okay. Richard, good to see you, by the way. Anybody else have anything? We've got 5 minutes left. Anybody working on something interesting? Doesn't have to be cool new feature. It could be boring, making things safer, better as well. All right. In that case, then, let's finish 5 minutes early, and yeah, we'll speak to you soon next time. I think Kara's going to be running the next one as well, so hopefully we'll have a nice warm welcome for Kara as well, and yeah, have to see the best of me, which is, I think, a joy for everybody as well. All right, then. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend and a good end to the week as well.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.